Hey there everyone, my name's Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Welcome to update number 5 on the 1000 scale Galaxy class project, and things are moving along. In today's update, we're going to be starting to install lighting into the secondary hull. Now that includes the 4 sections of LED tape, which will be lighting up all of the windows inside the ship, but also it'll include the 0402 SMDs that are going to be used for the navigational lights. And I'm toying around with the idea of the 0402 SMDs and maybe some fiber just to create the lens on the outside of the ship. The other things that are going into it as far as LEDs are those 2 5mm blue LEDs for the deflector dish and the 3mm red LED for the photon launcher. We're also going to get started on lighting up the warp nacelles, which are going to be really tricky in and of themselves because here's the thing. The antenna control boards that I am using for all of the shipboard lighting, which includes the warp engines and the internal lighting and the nav lights and the blinkies, that kind of thing. For the warp engines, it requires 5 cables. And while I only have 4 wires running through the post going into the warp engine, because that's all that I can cram in, even with the very thin wire that I'm using. But I do have the option to use the brass post as a wire, which is what I'm going to have to do. So I'm going to have to solder a wire up to the brass post going through the pylons up into the warp nacelle and use that for the 5th wire. So that's going to be interesting, a little bit tricky. I've never done that before, but at least we have that option open to us. So that's what we're going to try to get started in this update. So let's get right at it.
But before we get started, why not take a moment and click the subscribe button? And while you're here, click on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video.
I've gone ahead and installed the LED strips for all the interior window lights. They've also had their shrink tube attached to each wire and some larger shrink tube which is attached to the end of the LED strip, which just protects all the solder points. Not that they're going to go anywhere, but in this case you really want redundancy upon redundancy so you never have any sort of failure in the electronics of the ship, or at least any failures that you can mitigate ahead of time. So I've got them all wired up. They are epoxied in place. The adhesive backing on these things is not worth anything, so never rely on that, and I will never use hot melt glue inside a model. These have been epoxied in place. They are not going anywhere. You'd have to rip all of the paint off in order to get those things out of here. So I'm going to also be working on the lighting for the deflector dish, the photon tubes, and the navigation lights, which are the 0402 SMDs, and going into these small apertures. And I mentioned in the intro that I might use some fiber optics just to create a lens, not to go anywhere. The SMDs will actually be right down into these little holes, but I might use, for example, this piece here that's been mushroomed on the top, bloomed on the top with heat, and that's just going to be a very small piece, just really the as long as this hole is deep, and it's just going to sit in there and create a nice little lens on the surface of the ship, and that should translate the light from the 0402 SMD really nicely. So this is just a test piece that I was using. It's not going to be any sort of final thing. I'll be installing the SMDs first, and I'll probably put some temporary fiber in there just to keep it clear of paint for the painting process, and then at the end I will add the bloomed fiber in there. Now the 4 strips of LED tape is more than enough to deal with everything. I don't even need to add anything to the upper side of the upper section. That's really good. I will show you a lighting test of that here in a moment. I want to draw your attention to the back of the ship. You'll see that there's only 4 wires going through the post, but as I mentioned in the intro, the warp engines are going to require 5 wires for the antenna control board to run everything. So I'm going to have to make use of the brass post as a wire. It's perfectly conductive, that'll work, but it's just going to be tricky to get it all attached. It won't be too much of an issue down here. I'm going to be able to attach that generally without too much of a hassle. It's going to be right up here where the warp engine's attached to the pylons that we're going to have more of an issue because there's not much of the brass post poking up. So I'm going to have to dig down a little bit and be very careful in how I solder that up, and I'll have to be careful with it while the thing is being built so that there's no it never comes unattached during the building process. Once the warp engines are on, everything's been epoxied in place and it's solid, it's not going to go anywhere. I won't have any issues of that ever detaching. It's just in the build process that I have to be careful. So we're going to work through all of that, but I think it's going to work really well. Let me get this all set up and I will show you a lighting test of this with the top part just sitting on top. Everything is wired up, so with any luck I hit the switch over here and everything powers up, and you can get a good look at how well distributed that light is. And I've got hands free here so I can show you the bottom as well. I think that's going to work out quite nicely. Next job has been to install all of the teeny tiny 0402 SMDs. I've gone ahead and done that. What I did was simply inserted the 0402 SMD into each of the small drill points, the small apertures that I created. So this is going to be the strobe on the belly. We've got white constant on. We've got the red and the green. Then we've got the red and the green on this side. We've got a constant on here that is white. So simply, it's been drilled. It's been put in. I've tested the light to make sure that it's aimed properly. Then it's been epoxied in place, nice and solid. So I will show you what that looks like lit up. Now to give you an idea what that red, green, and white SMD look like in there, let's turn on the power. And there we go. You can clearly see them. The red and the green back here, the whites here. It'll probably get that bloomed fiber piece just to create the domed top there. We'll see how that goes, but that gives you a really good idea of what it's going to look like. Also, it'll be so much better once this outside piece is painted because you won't get that little bit of glow through the clear resin. So I think it's going to look pretty nice. Now it's time to work on the deflector dish parts. I need to get these two 5mm blue LEDs installed into these holes that I have drilled out in the deflector dish. Now what most people will do is they'll just put a whole bunch of light on the back of this. A lot of people will just put a blue LED strip on the back and let the light glow through the whole dish. The problem is the dish doesn't actually glow from behind this piece. What the studio model does, this is painted an orange color, and light shines from behind this insert piece and splashes onto the surface of this piece. So to accomplish that, so it looks the same as the studio model, I'm putting blue LEDs directly in behind this piece. And so when they're on, they're going to shine onto this insert piece, and that light's going to splash out all the way across the dish. And I'm actually going to see if I can get these installed in here now. And I just want them to go in far enough that they are going to do the job. See how close to flush I can get them. There's one. I'm just gonna get the other one in here, and if they go in, oh, that one's just in a little too far. There we go. All right. I'm gonna play around with these, but I want to show you kind of the idea. And this is going to be first go for me as well, because I haven't tested it yet. I've just set the deflector dish up on a post just so that I can keep it steady while I'm moving the camera around, giving you an idea of what it looks like. So those are the two 5mm blue LEDs nestled into those holes that I drilled out. And let's turn on the light. Now, it's going to be really difficult to get the effect because these parts haven't been painted yet, so they are still the translucent resin. And it's not going to really look right at all. But you can see how there's a blue haze all the way around. And once there is a bit of reflective white painted on the back of this piece, that'll really splash that light all the way around. So hopefully it'll come across the way that I want it to. And positioning this will be key as well. Also, there's a bit of a hot spot here. Again, when the parts are painted, you're not going to see that so much.
The next step of the process is the primer. This received black primer and then a white coat so that the base color doesn't have to work so hard. Then I went through first with a toothpick and then with a dental tool just to clear out the grid lines, as the primer has a tendency to fill these in. Then I drilled a hole into the back of the deflector insert so that I could put two 0402 SMD blues inside to help that ring on that part to glow. And I just took those two 0402 SMDs and glued them together back to back. I've got the insert prepared for working on it, so it's got the adhesion promoter, but I got the Aztec dummy mask out for this part, and if you can see, it's just too thick. So I'm gonna have to come up with a solution for masking this, because this is just gonna be way too thick and it's not gonna look right. So to deal with the problem, I've got out my yellow frog tape, I've put some on here, and I've traced it out with a pencil because the defined lines on the part actually allow me to get the pencil right in there. Now I'll take this off, I'll scan it on my printer, get it into my cutting program, and trace out these lines and try cutting some with my own vinyl cutter.
So I believe there's good reason why the Aztec dummy mask is the way it is. It is next to impossible to get these things done right. I've used a couple different vinyl mediums and a couple different goes at the file, and look how wonky these blue ones turned out. It is next to impossible to get it as thin as it needs to be and get the lines as straight on the curve as they should be. So I understand why it's like that, and of course the Aztec dummy mask will work if that's what you want to use. There's no problem with it. I'm just a little more picky as far as my perfectionist tendencies go, so what I ended up doing was using the yellow frog tape, and I just varnished it on very well, and I used a number 11 blade, a very sharp number 11 blade, and I just meticulously went around and cut it exactly to the shape while the tape was on the part. So if you want to get it exact as you can, that's the only way you're really going to be able to do it. Otherwise, use the Aztec dummy mask. It will do a decent job of it, and I understand why it is the way it is. So there's no issues with it. Just be aware of that if you are using the kit.
And here you can see that I've got the base color on, and I'm really happy with the way that the color has turned out. So the next step is to get the lighting installed, and I installed all the lights, I gave it a test, and it didn't look right at all, so I did a thing.
These 5mm LEDs, in the apertures I drilled out, did not do the job. It was too spotty, it didn't splash the light across the whole deflector housing. So, what I've done is I cleared out the paint in the flat section inside here. Problem is when I cleared that out, it also pulled some of the other paint on the rest of the deflector housing, so I went and cleared the rest of the paint out. I also sanded down the paint on the back side. This also got a bunch of the paint removed because I ended up having to put this mask bag on. I had to create a new one, and in the process it pulled paint. So a bunch of paint has come off there. This will get repainted. And then what I'm going to do with this is I've got these two small stretches of blue LEDs, and they've been wired up together. And this is going to go behind, and this is going to go in. And this, you can already tell, even though it's not properly lined up and it's washed out on screen, but this is giving me a much better overall splash of the blue light if the deflector insert piece gets positioned properly. So this is what we're going to do moving forward. What I have to do next is create a mask to go on this inside part here, and then the same size will go on the back. I will give this another shot of white primer and another shot of white on the outside here. That'll clean it up. And then so this inner side part will remain translucent to that blue light coming through. And then I will paint this up. This will require a couple extra coats of paint, which is going to be tricky because this is a custom mix color. This is a custom mix color too, but you don't have to do as many coats of it because you've got the white backing
underneath.
Since I got the lighting sorted, I figured it was time to repaint this, and I went a little bit different on the color scheme. I went a little bit more yellow on the dish housing, and I think that this portion turned out pretty much the same as before. And if I compare this with a shot from the studio model, you should see that they're fairly close in color. Now, I think I might just give this one another shot of color because there's a strange dark mark on here and there. So I'm just going to give this a good respray, just one more coat to make sure that those little details are taken care of. Once that's all done, then it's time to put these together and put the lighting in the back and see how that works.
Taking a moment to mock up what the lighting looks like, or what it will look like when it's all together. Nothing has been permanently installed. Even the insert piece on the deflector dish is just hot melt glued in place. It's very fragile at the moment. That's why you're seeing some of the hot spots. But I wanted to get an idea of what this lighting looks like, and I think it's turning out very, very well. The blue splash is coming across the way I had hoped. Those hotspots will be taken care of, and the window lights are coming through just as I had hoped that they would. So this is looking very, very good indeed. I'm excited about this.
And this is the part of the update where I would normally say, and that's going to be everything for this update. However, I do have something I need to talk to you about. You see, all that lighting that's in there, well, not quite all of it, but a good chunk of it, the LED strips for the window lights and for the deflector dish that I've worked on this project, it's nice, but it's wrong. Well, here's the thing. I've had the opportunity to start working with a programmer who's going to be doing programming for all of the effects needed on this project on the Arduino board. And that's not just the phaser strip effect, that's going to be everything. The phasers, the warp chiller grills going to warp everything, the flashers, whatever we're going to need on the project. This is going to handle it through the Arduino board, which means we're going to need to use smart LEDs, which are LEDs that are addressable. You can actually select what each individual LED in a line does, and that's going to be so important for some of these effects. But it means that the dumb LEDs, the non-addressable standard LED tape that I put into this model, well, that's going to have to come out. Those were epoxied in. They're going to need to come out. That's going to be a job for another day. I'm not doing it right now. So it's nice, but it's wrong because we're going in a completely different direction, and I'm super excited about this. Now, the guy who's going to be doing the programming, I'm really hoping he's going to start a YouTube channel. So if he does, I will make sure that I put him in my suggested channels down below, and I will definitely promote that because it's going to be something really interesting to watch. Now, it does mean we're changing directions. And if you are working towards making what you do better, that's going to happen from time to time where you're going to do a full 360 degree or a 180 or whatever it is, and you're going to completely change what you're doing. And that is okay, because it's always good to push yourself to do more and to do better, and that's how you get better. I'm really looking forward to this. More work, but I think it's going to be really good for the project in the long run. He's also going to be working on the effects for the Enterprise E, including the Buzzards, which is cool, and I'm sure that we're going to be doing other projects down the road. I'm excited. So, I hope that you've enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure that you hit that like button. If you're new to my channel or you haven't done so yet, why not hit that subscribe button today? You'll make me very happy if you do. And remember, we're working towards that 1,000 subscriber goal for the 1,000 scale Enterprise D Galaxy class project. So if you haven't done so yet, hit the subscribe button and help me out on that journey. My name's Andrew. This has been Canadian Starships. Have a great day, everyone.